Hi, welcome to another session of Abundant Recovery. My name is Jimmy Salas, and I have the privilege of being one of the pastors here at the Abundant Recovery program. And I'm so excited for the lesson that we're going to be sharing with you today, Truth Part 1. But before we get into it, I just kind of want to explain a few things. In this teaching, you'll hear me talk about something that's called inventory towards the end. And this is something that we want our recoveries to work through. It's where they begin to take inventory of the things that happen to them in their life. Ultimately, a lot of us are dealing with the things that we're dealing with, whether it be addiction or anxiety, depression, PTSD, what have you, as a result of trauma. It's very important that we begin to work through that trauma in our life so that we can truly experience the freedom and the recovery that Jesus came for every single one of us to have. Now, with that being said, I have to believe that maybe you're watching this today and you've never had the opportunity of being here with us in person at Abundant Recovery. And I want to say to you, I want to encourage you, if you can, there's nothing like being in the room. This is just a fraction of what Abundant Recovery is with the teaching. I believe that the heart and soul of what really helps individuals as they go through the recovery is the small room experience. And inventory is something that is done in the small room, and I believe it should be done in the small room. And so the reason why I'm making this video for you today is because if you are watching this, I hope this message helps you, and I hope that there's something that you can take from this and apply it into your life and ultimately begin to experience the recovery and freedom that Jesus came and died for you to have as well. But I also want to say this to you. I believe that inventory should be done in the care and the support of our Abundant Recovery program. So that means that you're surrounded by our prayer team, our care team, our small room leadership team. And so as you're watching this, if you're interested in going through inventory, I want to encourage you to sign up for the next semester of Abundant Recovery, or even if we're in semester, you can join us at any moment once we're in semester. And you can do that by clicking the link in the description or by going to abundant.org/recovery. But number two, if for whatever reason you can't join us in person, I'm going to ask that if you really want to consider doing inventory, that you reach out to your pastor, your support people in your life. Let them know what it is and what you're going to be going to do. I don't recommend that you do this alone. There's a lot of heaviness that comes from inventory. I'm not trying to scare you out of watching this teaching. I'm not trying to scare you out of doing anything, but I want to make sure that when you're doing inventory, your heart is prepared and you're ready emotionally and spiritually ready to go through what inventory is. It can be an amazing thing, and it can be the thing that ultimately leads to your healing and your recovery, but it should also be done in the right place, right? You don't have surgery just on the side of the road. You have surgery in a surgery room with surgeons and the proper support personnel there, right? And I think inventory is a lot like that. And so I want to encourage you, listen to the message. I think the message can still help you. But again, if you're not able to join us in person with Abundant Recovery, I would strongly urge you to reconsider doing inventory by yourself on your own, okay? Do it with a support system. Do it if you feel that you are in a place where you can do it and there's people that you can rely on if it does get a little heavy to help you through this, okay? With that being said, I want to go ahead and let you hear the message, and I'll be talking to you shortly. All right. Well, I'm excited to be here tonight to share this message with you. The reality of where we're at here in recovery is that we've been building towards this moment. Okay? When you're climbing a hill or whatever, right, it's working your way all the way up to the top. That's the most difficult. And then once you kind of get to the top, it's a lot easier to walk down a hill than it is to walk up, or walk up a mountain, or walk down a mountain as it is to walk up a mountain, right? And we feel in recovery that once we get to inventory, which is what we're going to be doing starting this week, this is the hardest part, but after this, it gets easier, okay? And so everything that we've been doing for the last several weeks has been building towards this moment. And what I mean by this is it was important for us that you understood who Jesus really was to you, who he could be, how you could use the authority of his name, how God's love would open up a world of opportunities for you. It's really important that you had a foundation of our faith and the understanding of who God and Jesus are and what they can do for you, so that when you take this next step, which is the step of inventory, you have a better bedrock for it. You have a better foundation for it. And, I want to encourage you that if for whatever reason you missed any of the weeks leading up to this, you can go on our YouTube channel. We do have an Abundant Recovery YouTube channel, and you can see all the past teachings that we've done, myself, Pastor Dave. They're all there, and you can go back and you can watch that if for whatever reason you're missing one of these, okay? But this is where we begin to tackle the things that have ultimately led us to why we're here in recovery. And I want to start, before we explain what inventory is, I want to start by explaining why I believe we should do inventory. And this comes out of Scripture. It's a parable that Jesus gives in Luke chapter 8, verses 5 through 8. And I'm just going to summarize this parable. Jesus is speaking, and he says, look, there's a farmer, and he's sowing seed into a field. And essentially, there's 4 different types of field. There's the seed falls, or 4 different types of ground. The seed falls on the first ground, which was the road. And it says that because it was hard, the birds swooped down, ate the seed, and carried it away. The second seed fell into what's called stony ground. It says that seed begins to take root, begins to grow. But because of the stones in the ground, it says the sun scorches it, and it withers and it dies. And the next seed falls into a ground that has weeds in it. And as that seed, again, takes root, begins to grow, begins to sprout, the weeds grow with it and choke the life out of the seed, and it dies as well. And then lastly, the seed falls on good ground, takes root, grows, produces a great harvest. In this parable, Jesus is illustrating the 4 different types of hearts or postures that we carry in receiving the Word of God and what it can do in our life. Ultimately, the Word can produce life in our life, but it's only if we're good ground. And what we need to take from this parable is a couple of things, but first is understanding that we're all here in recovery to work on our ground. I need you to understand that. Okay, I need you to understand, I'm not judging you, but right now you're not good ground. But the beautiful thing about good ground is good ground can be made. You can work bad ground into good ground. Okay? Just because you have bad ground doesn't mean that you can't eventually become good ground. I need you to understand that. Okay? But so there's these 3 types, and we're really going to focus more so on one than the other 3, or the other 2, but let me just briefly explain what the differences are, okay? The first seed, when it falls onto a pathway, okay, just think of if you've ever gone like hiking, right? Like you just go, you're walking a trail, right? So it's not concrete, it's dirt. But so many people have passed through it, dogs, animals, whatever, right? That they create a pathway. Like the ground is hard, right? Like it's not soft. You can't scratch at it with your hands. Like, even with the shovel, like you would have to use some force to kind of break it up, right? It's not like you walk out into the desert right over here and you can just grab the sand, pick it up, right? It's been packed in. Right, so any seed that falls into that is going to have a real hard time spreading roots because it's never going to be able to penetrate the surface because it's so hard. And that's the type of person that is hard-hearted. You know, we've gone through so many things, so much trauma in our life that the moment that someone wants to bring something good into our lives, we don't even allow it to penetrate the surface. We don't even allow it to be a thought that enters into our mind for a millisecond. It's like we reject it immediately, right? And so someone could be wanting to sow something good into your life, but nothing will ever come of it. Instead, other things will just come take it away and eat it, right? So that's the first ground. The second ground that I want to talk about is the one with weeds in it. And I think it's important to talk about this one, and I might ruffle a few little feathers here, but you have to be nice to me. I'm in pain. You can have done all the right things. And what I mean by this is you're coming to church, you're reading the Bible, you're coming to recovery, you're praying, you're doing your declarations, right? You're working all these different things that we're teaching you into your life, but you don't change the people that you're associated with, the environments that you're hanging out in, right? In that situation, I can sow a seed, and a seed has the potential of producing a harvest, right? It has the potential of changing your life. You don't think about it when it's a seed, but it does. But if that seed is sown in the ground with other weeds, those weeds will choke the life out of that seed. And so this ground speaks to the person that is doing everything right, but not doing everything right. You can literally apply everything that we teach you, but if you don't change your environment will choke the life out of you. And I know that's a hard thing for me to say because I'm the one that's standing up here not having to necessarily change their life. You're the one that's going to have to find new friends, new relationships, in some cases, distancing yourself from family. But I'm saying it because I believe that there's a lot of you that are here in recovery and you've tried other things. You've tried other programs. You've tried doing this or that. And for whatever reason, it didn't work. And I'm not here to attack or speak ill of whatever it is that you tried prior to coming to recovery. I would say that maybe it did work, but you didn't change your environment. And so that seed that you planted and you watered and you cared for had the life choked out of it by its environment. And that's an important thing to understand because nothing that you do, even recovery, will work if you don't change your environment. Does that make sense? Okay, but the third one is the one that we're really going to spend some time on. It says stony ground. There's a couple of issues when you're trying to plant something in stony ground. The first thing is when you have a ground that's got a lot of rocks in it, it's not really like soil, okay? So the reason why you get potting soil as opposed to just going and grabbing dirt and planting your plant in dirt, which if you go and you plant your plant in dirt, now you know, I'm going to explain to you why it always dies, all right? So like if you just go and get sand, it doesn't retain water. Water just flows through it. So the reason why you get potting soil is it retains the moisture. So those roots can feed over it over time. Okay? Same thing happens with stony ground. If you have a lot of stones in the ground, you actually have a lot of areas where the water just runs. It can't sit in the ground for a very long time. So that seed that you plant will be able to take root initially, but it's not going to be strong as strong as it needs to be because it's not able to pull enough nutrients from the soil. Okay. The other thing with stony ground that you see from time to time is that it will affect how the roots can grow and how far they can spread. Right. So I actually have a lot of experience with stony ground and stones. They suck. Don't ever get kidney stones, guys. I'm telling you, it's not worth it. Drinks lots of water. But anyway, I used to live in the North Hills area up in the Northeast, and the house that we had at the time when I was growing up, my dad's the type of person of like, why pay someone else to do it when you can do it yourself? Which is, I'm grateful because I learned things, but I'm not grateful because it sucked to have to do all that stuff. And so, like, my dad's like, hey, we're going to put in our sprinkler system at the house. And it's like, all right. And, like, I don't know how many of you in here have dug trenches for sprinkler system. It's not crazy. You're going like 6 inches into the ground. You don't really have to go deep, but there's just a lot that you have to do. But the issue that I was running into at our house was that because we were so close to the mountain, there's a lot of large rocks. Like every 5 feet, or like every 3 feet, I was having to like stop because my pickaxe would hit a rock, and a large rock that's covered in mostly clay on the Northeast, it like the whole thing shakes, right? Like your body starts shaking, and like it's kind of like the cartoon, like that was kind of happening. And so then I'm having to find the edge of the thing, dig it out, pry it out, whatever, in some cases break it. Right, so there was just a lot of stones. So I'm super familiar with stony ground. And some stones were, the size of my hand. Some stones were, the size of my iPad. But I remember we were doing something in the front yard, and we were needing to get to the main drain that runs to the street for the house. And I came across a stone, and I started doing the same thing of, let me keep digging around to try and find the edge to pry this thing out. And I found an edge and was trying to pry. It wouldn't move. Got the big pry bar, stuck it in the ground, wouldn't move. I'm like, man, what is going on with this thing? Well, I finally dug like around all the edges, and the stone was like 4 feet long. Like, that was not a stone. That was, I called it like a mountain seed, It was just like, eventually a mountain would sprout out of it. It was crazy, right? And so stony ground on the surface looks like any other ground. But the moment we began to get a couple inches below the surface, we realized that we were in something that was just not going to be fun for the sake of digging the trenches and all that stuff. Now, in doing all those things, one of the other things that we did was we planted a tree. And, we planted a tree in our backyard, and, I guess we had been there, I was already married, so like 10 years. So I think we planted the tree the first year that we were there. So like that tree basically had been there for 10 years, maybe 9. And it had grown to be taller than the house, and we had a 2-story house, and so it's a pretty tall tree. And one night, if you've ever lived up close to the mountain, you know that whenever it's windy in El Paso, it's 10 times worse on the mountain. It's horrible. And so one night it was super windy, and then you just heard this like loud bang. I was too tired to go and actually look. I was like, I'm sure someone's trampoline flew into someone else's backyard or something, right? Woke up in the morning, and it was the tree. The wind was so intense that it literally ripped the tree out of the ground. The root ball came out of the ground. And we were trying to figure out, how did that happen? This tree's so big. And we were talking to our neighbor, and the neighbor's like, the issue over here is that there's so many stones in the ground that the roots couldn't get wide enough. They were going down, but they couldn't go wide because they kept running into these stones. So it didn't have the foundation that it needed to hold itself up when the storm came. Right? And I found that very fascinating. And then that was the only time in my life that I actually cared about a plant. I was sad. So the reason why I tell you that story, and I talk about stony ground, is I think that when the Bible's referring to stony ground, he's referring to us in that human beings in general, but specifically abundant recovery. Every single one of us has gone through something, some sort of trauma, right? Someone did something to us, or we experienced something, or something happened to someone that we know, or we ourselves did something to someone else, right? There was a trauma that took place in our life. And I'm sure most of us are the same way in that, what did we do with that trauma? We tried to forget it. We tried to hide it. We suppressed it. We kind of work on it, but we don't really want to talk about it. We don't want to think about it. We don't want to look into that room inside our lives, right? We don't want to open that door. It's the thing that we know is there, but it's easier for us to act like it's not, right? And so what did we start to do? What we started to do is we started to put these stones into our ground, trying to hide them and bury them as deep as we possibly can so that our surface looks fine. But the truth is that for a lot of us, we all know that the moment we start skimming past the surface a little bit, we start to see that there are things that are not fine. I'm always surprised at every semester of recovery when people come in and I'm like, I know you, and I never would have expected you in recovery. But it always reminds me, I can't see what stones are below the surface. And so I'm glad that they're here. Because in order for us to get to good ground, we got to get the stones out of the ground. For a lot of you, your approach to correcting or changing or fixing whatever it is that you've been struggling with has been everything but the stone. What do I mean by that? Someone will walk in here and say, I need help with addiction, but the addiction is really a result of an abuse. Or I'm struggling with codependency, but the codependency is actually a result of anxiety. Right? So we're treating the symptom, but not the source. And it's okay at times to treat the symptoms. And in some cases, the symptom is so severe that we do need to treat it before we get to the source. But when you get a bacterial infection, you need antibiotics to kill the bacteria. Yes, we don't want the runny nose and the cough and the chills and the fever. We want to help with those things, but ultimately, the thing that's going to, if left unchecked, take our life is the infection, not the runny nose. And so if we're not careful, our approach to our own personal recovery is to treat the symptoms and not the source. This is why inventory is so important, is to recognize
where the real fight is. Maybe the thing that you've been fighting wasn't what you should have been fighting all along. Maybe it was something else. But we haven't dug around enough to find the stone to realize it. Inventory is about getting these stones out. Now, why is it so important to get these stones out? Because you have to understand the storms of life will never stop. They'll never stop. It doesn't matter if you carry the title pastor. It doesn't matter if you come to church 7 times a week. It doesn't matter if you prayed for 82 minutes last night. If you can recite the entire Old Testament, it doesn't matter. The storms of life will come. I'm a living example. 2 weeks ago, me and my entire family had COVID, and then now I'm dealing with this. If this is not a storm, I don't know what is. But it's important that you correct your ground. Because like that tree that I had, if your ground is not set, you may be good for 9 years, but then a storm will come and rip you out of the ground. There are some of you in here that know what it's like to start going down the right path and to start seeing the fruits of going down the right path, the benefits of going down the right path, only to have a storm hit you and it feels like you got to start all over again. The whole point of doing inventory within our recovery program is about getting you to the point where when the storms of life come, you may be bruised and you may be battered, but you still remain standing. Because if every time a storm comes, it rips you out of the ground, how many more of those starting overs do you have left in you? There's been I don't even know how else to characterize this, but a wave of suicide in our city. And, I think there's, obviously suicide is a very serious thing because it leads to a loss of life, but if we're not careful, we don't fully comprehend the individuals that get to that point. How many times had they tried to get help? And did the help fail? Not in the sense that someone literally failed them, but in that their expectation of what was going to come from it didn't meet the reality of what came out of it. And ultimately, there's decisions that we have to make ourselves. But I look at this and I wonder if these were individuals that tried so hard to get the seed and plant the seed, get the seed and plant the seed and water the seed and care for the seed. And that's great and that's awesome. But then the storm came and it ripped it out. And so then they got the seed again. So, oh, maybe it wasn't this seed, it needs to be this seed. And they grabbed it, they put it in the ground, and they watered it, and they cared for it, and it grew, and it was doing good. And then another storm came and it ripped it out of the ground. It's okay, well, maybe it wasn't the first two, and so let me try this third one, and I'm going to go and grab that seed, and I'm going to stick it in the ground, and I'm going to go deeper in the ground, and I'm going to buy Miracle Grow, and I'm going to do whatever I can to nurture this seed, all the while ignoring the stones. And another storm came, and it ripped it out of the ground. How many more times can you start over? before you say, maybe I just can't. Maybe it just won't work. This is why inventory is so important to me. I don't want you to give up. I don't want you to quit. I don't want you to think that nothing will work. I don't want you to think that nothing can change. This can change. You can be free. You can be happy. You can have peace. You can be recovered and you can be restored. But we got to change your ground. We got to make sure that the investment that is being put into you won't get ripped out the next time there's a storm. The Bible talking about having the right foundation. It says, neither does a man build a house on sand. Right? Because when you build your house on sand and the rain comes and the wind blows, your house is destroyed. But you built your house on the rock. What's the rock? The Word of God. Right? So that when the wind comes and the rain blows, your house is still standing. See, I believe that when we begin to work the rocks, the stones out of our life, we begin to change our ground from stony ground to good ground. Now you can start to build a proper foundation for your life. Now you can build the right kind of house. Now you can have something that when the storms of life come, maybe it breaks a window, maybe it rips off a couple of shingles on the roof, and you're annoyed, but your house is still standing. Whereas the way it was before, the wind blew, the rain came, and now you got to start all over again. Inventory is necessary so that you don't have to keep restarting. Inventory is about working those stones out. You see, you can't give God something that you don't know when you don't even know what it is. The Bible says, cast your cares upon him, for he cares for you. Jesus said that when he went to the cross to carry our burdens. You know what that burden is? Your stone. Your stone. Right? Several weeks ago when we had the cross and you were nailing it. You know what you were really nailing? Your stone. But we got to dig it out of the ground so that we can truly let it go. So we can truly give it to God. Well, Pastor, can I just say, God, search my soul and take it all out? Yeah, but that's not really giving it to him. You got to say, no, I don't want this anymore. It doesn't belong to me anymore. Jesus, you came, you died, so that I wouldn't have to carry this anymore. So here, I give it to you. And in the process of doing that, what are you doing? You're changing your ground. You're becoming good ground. So that the seeds that are being planted, that have been being planted for the last 8-9 weeks, will produce fruit, but also will remain standing the next time the storm comes. So this is why we do inventory. So I wanted to take a moment to explain it to you, because I think it was so important for you to understand the what we're trying to accomplish here, okay? Now, as we transition to what inventory is, let me just give you this caveat, okay? Inventory is not easy. It's not easy because we're asking you to go back through your life and all the stuff that you don't want to think about, you don't want to talk about, you don't want to remember. Those are the things that we're asking you to do. Now, we're not asking you to do it because we want you to suffer or we want you to be in pain. That's not why we're doing this. We're doing this because that thing is a stone in your ground that we have to acknowledge and begin to let go of. That's why we're doing it. Okay? I need you to trust that all the information that we have been giving you up until this point is information that is beneficial for you as you go through inventory. I need you to remember that we have a prayer team that is here tonight and is continuously here every single Tuesday. And so if at any point tonight you need a prayer team, just ask for them. They're walking around the halls when you're in your rooms, and they'd be happy to pray with you. I need you to reach out to your small room leader if you're struggling with this. It's going to be hard, but that's why they're there, to encourage you. Many of your leaders have done this themselves. Abundant Recovery was birthed out of another program called Celebrate Recovery. That's what we started with when we launched a recovery program here at the church, and inventory was one of the main things there. When I got to inventory, I went through it myself. I did it by myself before I ever did it in the church. When I got to inventory, I said, okay, this is the reason why this program is going to work. Because if you're not willing, and if you don't have an opportunity to face the very source of the anxiety, the source of the depression, the source of the anger, the source of the addiction, of the PTSD, then all you're ever going to get is temporary relief. And I don't want temporary relief for you anymore. I want permanent change. I want recovery and restoration for you. But the only way we get there is by acknowledging the stone. Okay? The last caveat that I'm going to say is there's two sides to inventory. There is the heavy side, and there is the good side. When you do inventory, you must do both. Don't just do the heavy, and also don't just do the good. Okay? So I'm going to explain it to you. They're going to put it up on the screen, but I'm going to explain it to you. And so this is inventory, okay? So you're going to have a sheet, and you do columns like this, or rows, however you want to do it. But essentially, it's these 5 things, okay? So the first one is the person. So who is the object of my resentment or fear? Okay, so this is who or what. Because maybe for you, it's not a who, it's a what, right? It was a situation that happened to you, right? You were laid off, or there was a multi-car accident, or whatever it may be, right? So that's a what, not necessarily a who. But for most of us, most likely it's a who. Who was it? Who was the person that caused you to have resentment or fear or pain or whatever you may think is going on, okay? So that's the first column. The second one, once you have a who or a what, right? So let's say the who is Billy. And if there's someone in here with the name Billy, I apologize. But it's your fault. So the who is Billy. The cause, right? What specific action did that person take that hurt me? So this is, what did Billy do? What did he do? What did he do to you? Or what did he do to someone else that affected you? Right? So we're going to write it down. So you can see here already, like some of you are already getting anxious. You're getting a little fidgety. You're just like, see, I knew I shouldn't have come tonight. I should have stayed home. But it's okay. Third column, the effect. What effect did the action have on my life? How did this change your life? Were you going in one direction, and the moment this happened, all of a sudden it shifted, and you started going another direction? Did you lose your job as a result of this? Did you lose your marriage? What was the effect that happened here? The next column is the damage. What damage did that action do to my basic social security and or sexual instincts, right? So the effect is, how did it change the trajectory of your life? The damage is, what was the permanent result of that, right? So, someone who was raped, for example, is going to have issues being intimate with people or be overly intimate with people, right? Like there is a result that comes from it. So it didn't necessarily, there's the drastic life change, but then there's also just the residual that you see in other areas of your life. So we're going to list that. And actually, let me just say, look, your inventory is for you. You're not turning this into us, okay? This is your personal thing. I should have said that at the very beginning. So you're like, we're not going to ask you to sign it, and like we're going to know your deepest, darkest secrets. Okay, like that's not what we're doing. This is for you. And then the last part is my part. Okay, so what part of the resentment am I responsible for? Now, my part is really, really, really important because there's two things. The first is hurt people, right? So what did we do because we were hurt? Years ago, I had a situation where a young girl at the age of 5 was being molested by her neighbor or her uncle's neighbor. And she was molested from the age of 5 to 7. At that same time, she began molesting her younger brother. Right? So the result of what was happening to her, in turn, changed her perception of what was going on to thinking that molesting her brother was okay because she thought what was happening to her was okay, right? So she would put under my part that. But then there's some of you here that you need to understand that you bear no responsibility. Like something horrible just happened to you. And it had nothing to do with you. It's just that there's evil people that do evil things. But it's important for you to see it. Now, and again, as you're going through this, you're going to want to do a couple of things. Number one, you're going to want to not write any of it down and just, I thought it. Write it down. There is something to putting pen to paper with respect to really anything, but specifically inventory. You got to work it out. Working it out means don't more than thinking it out. You got to write it down. Okay? Number two, some of you, there may be 13 persons. Right? You may want to list them all. Okay? I'm not trying to overwhelm you. If you want to do that, more power to you. I want you to at least do one. I think you should do more than one if you have more than one. But you need to go through this process, and you need to go through this because you begin to see the source of your pain. As you're unearthing this, you begin to see how what this person did has translated into that anxiety that you have, or the fact that you can't hold a job, or the fact that you can't stay in a relationship for more than 6 months, or the fact that all you want to do is sleep with someone, right? You begin to see the actions of what this person did and the overall effect that it began to have in your life. And now you're able to put yourself in a place where you say, okay, that's what it was. That's what I need to fight. Years ago, this woman walks into my office, and she walked into my office to complain about her boss. That was her whole thing. I was being treated unfairly, Pastor Jimmy. I've done this, and this is all my credentials, and this is how I did it. And I mean, don't you think I was doing it right? And this, and so she was talking about that. But every so often, in me hearing her story, she would also mention the fact that her father died. And so she was talking this, and then her father died, and she's doing this, and then her father died, and then her father died. And finally, when everything was said and done, I just felt like the Holy Spirit said, ask her this. So she's done talking. I said, okay, you done? She said, yeah. I said, let me ask you one question. She said, okay. I said, why are you so angry? She looked at me like, What? I said, why are you so angry? She says, that's not what I came in here for. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, I said, no. I said, answer the question. Why are you so angry? She broke down in tears. Was she having issues at work? Yeah. But the real issue was she wasn't over the fact that her dad was gone. She was angry at God because he wasn't there. Dealing with unresolved trauma will affect you in ways that you could never imagine. I had another situation where a guy walks in. I mean, if this guy was talking to any one of you, you would have thought instantly, this guy's crazy. Bananas. He walked in, I can hear voices coming through my radio, there's government drones flying over my double-wide trailer, my wife is casting spells on me, he's playing recordings, do you hear that, Pastor, do you hear that? Or he's all this stuff, and then he stops and he's like, you know what, I don't even know why I'm here, you think I'm crazy, I'm just going to leave. And I said, whoa. He said, what? I said, did I tell you you're crazy? No. He said, but I can see it in your face. I said, you can see what in my face? You think I'm nuts. I said, did I tell you you're crazy? No. And I began to illustrate to him where in his trailer he was hearing the noises and where his kitchen was, and I drew his whole floor plan. I said, this is what you told me, right? Yeah. I said, so was I paying attention to you? I said, yeah. I said, keep talking. He kept talking. He was legitimately hearing things. He legitimately thought that the government was out to get him. But the reality of his life was that I think it was about a year or a little bit less than a year prior to the conversation that I was having with him. He lived out in Chaparral, and he had a plot of land. And so there was his trailer, and then there was his parents' trailer. And one day he was out doing something, and him and his dad had gotten into an altercation, and his dad swung a 2x4 at him. He dodged it, shoved his dad, said a few choice words, and ended it with, I hope you go to hell. Walked into his trailer. He sat down in his living room, and once he began to cool off, he started walking towards his bedroom. Now, his front door was one of those front doors that has a little window in it. And as he's walking past the front door, out of the corner of his eye, he sees his father standing outside with a revolver pointed to his head, and he pulls the trigger. I said, that's it right there. I said, all of this is because of that. I said, your last words to your father were, go to hell. And you're living with the shame, the guilt, and the anger of that moment. I said, let me guess, you still live in the same spot? He said, yes, sir. I said, every day when I get home from work, I relive that gunshot. He says, Pastor, what do I need to do? I said, you need to forgive yourself. I said, and you need to get a punching bag. He said, what? I said, get a punching bag. He said, why? I said, you're angry. I said, all that's got to go somewhere. You're bottling it all up, and it's literally making you crazy. So let it out. 3 months later, he walks into my office. I don't even recognize this guy. He sits down, he says, you don't remember me, do you? Oh my gosh. I remember. I said, what'd you do? I said, I got a punching bag. I use it 3 times a day. If I treat the symptom and not the source, I don't get anywhere. The reason why we do inventory is to begin to treat the source. So go ahead and put the inventory back up. Or do we have the positive version on the slide? If not, just put the negative one, it's fine. Yeah. So, on this sheet of paper, on one side, you're going to have this. This is the heavy. Okay? On the other side of the paper. Now, please pay attention. Because every semester, people don't do it. Put attention. I'm feeling better. It is so important that one side be the heavy stuff and the other side be the good stuff. And not, I'm going to do front and back of the heavy and then a separate piece of paper of the good. Okay? This is why it's so important. Because if you have one entire paper and all it is negative things about your life, you're going to get consumed and overwhelmed by it. But this is why I want it to be on the same piece of paper. Pastor, what if I need more room? Then get a second paper and do good and bad on the second paper as well. But I need you, when you're getting overwhelmed on the heavy stuff, to turn the paper over and switch to the good stuff. So what's the good stuff? It's the same thing, but it's good. Who's the person that has brought joy into your life? What did they do? What was the effect of it? How did it change your life? Not the damage, but how did it help you? How did it change things in your life? And what was your part? Did you smile at someone, they smiled back at you, and now you have a friend? Maybe you should smile more often. Right? Did you open the door? Whatever it is. But this is so, so, so important. We're doing 2 things here, okay? Number 1, we're beginning to identify the stones so that we know what we need to work on. But number 2, we got to change our focus. I don't even know if it's part of this lesson. It may not. It's okay. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to give you part of next week's lesson. We need to change our focus. I'm going to end it with these 2 things, okay? The reason why I want you to work on good is because you're going to get overwhelmed on the heavy, and it's important to work on good to help you with that. But number 2, you got to change what you focus on. Have you ever noticed whenever you get a new car, it seems like everyone in El Paso is now driving that new car? But I guarantee you not everyone decided they wanted to buy a Kia Sorento. What it is it's now it's more of a dominant thought in your mind. You may not be actively thinking about it, but it's something that stands out to you because it's something that you own, and so now you see it everywhere. What would happen if instead of seeing pain and anger and depression and sorrow and sadness and addiction and codependency, you started seeing joy and laughter and shiny sky, right? What you think about and what you focus on will be ultimately what you see in your life. And the more you see of something, the more you'll get of that very thing. If I'm so focused on all the pain in my life that all I ever see is more pain, this is why I'm telling you, don't go watch stupid stuff that's stupid. I'm being restrained here, right? Like if you're miserable, don't watch things that are miserable. If you're miserable, go home and watch The Office. Laugh. It's okay. Watch something silly. Why? Because it changes what you think about and what you focus on. And if you'll change what you focus on, guess what you'll find more of in your life? Good things. Right now, you probably can list more bad things than you can list good things in your life. But the truth is there's probably more good in your life than there is bad. You just don't see it. So we got to change the way that you see it. This is why there is a good side to inventory, okay? And I want you to do that. The last thing that I'm going to say before I dismiss you, okay, and is that there are scriptures for inventory in your lesson, okay? Those are there to help you as you're going through these things. And just read these over to yourself. You have declarations. You have a weekly prayer. Use this. If you haven't been using them any other week, shame on you, but it's okay. I still love you. But use the lessons, use the scripture, use the declarations, use the weekly prayer to help you this week as you work through inventory. Hey, I love you so much. I believe in you. I know that you're going to be able to get through this. We're almost there. We're almost at the top of the mountain. Keep pushing. Keep fighting. You are going to work through this, and you will see God's recovery in your life. I love you all. We are dismissed to go to your rooms so that you can do inventory.
Well, I hope that helped you. I hope that gave you some clarity and some understanding of how you can begin to work through the truth of your life, of what has happened and what's come into your life, and begin to work that stony ground into good ground. I believe that you can be good ground. I believe that your life can change, and I believe that ultimately Jesus, when we surrender to Him and we begin to take those stones out of our life and we give them to Him where they rightfully should be, right? He carried our burdens on that cross so that we could be free, that we could experience that. And again, I want to encourage you, if you, for whatever reason, haven't been to Abundant Recovery, you haven't come and seen us here in El Paso in person, I would love, I would personally invite you to come check us out. Again, you can register with the link in the description or by going to abundant.org/recovery. And if for whatever reason you do want to do inventory on your own, you feel like, you know what, I think I can do this, I think I have the right support personnel with me, then I'll be praying for you. I'm encouraged by it, and I'm believing that God's recovery and restoration will begin to be unlocked as you begin to take those stones out of your life. I love you, and I can't wait to see you. Thank you.